My name is Ron. I'm the Executive Director of Men Having Babies. My husband and I have 2 children from surrogacy who are now almost 18 years old. So, if anybody's been here last year, you might have seen my kids. They were helping with registration and translation devices. They couldn't come this year. And at the next hour or so, we're going to try to help you, and we're going to go down and introduce the panel in a second, but we're going to try to help you get a better sense, having seen the personal stories panel just a few minutes ago, get a better sense of what does it feel to go through this process? How is it going to feel for you to having gone through this process and through it as with respect to your communities, your families, the questions they might ask you, the question you might ask yourselves right now about this process. It would have been ideal if we did this after we had the chance to already go through the basics of surrogacy, which we're going to do at 5:30, I think, in the Planning Your Parenting Journey session. But we want to do it at this point so that we can connect it to the previous panel, and also so that you get a sense of what you feel about this before you even decide how much you want to invest in learning how to do it. So before we start the actual panel, I want to go one by one and have every panelist introduce themselves. Go ahead, Jan.
Hi. Whoa, I'm loud. My name is Jan Silverman, and I am a counselor, this kind of counselor, as opposed to the legal counselor. I am a counselor in Toronto, Canada, originally from New York City, but they have Trump, we don't.
You have Ford.
Only in Ontario, you're right, Trump light. And I have worked in the field of reproductive health for 26 years. I am an infertile woman, and I made my family through adoption. I have 2 former children. Now they are grown people. They used to be children. And I have worked in this field because I have such much experience, but also an understanding of the process of wanting a family and not being sure how to go about achieving this dream.
My name is Henny Bos. I'm a professor at the University of Amsterdam since February 1st, although I already started working at the University of Amsterdam in 2000, and since 2000 I'm very interested in, so that's also my research line, on same-sex parenting, same-sex families, lesbian families, gay father families. I have a longitudinal study in the Netherlands on lesbian families. I'm co-investigator of the US National Longitudinal Lesbian Family Study. And the PI of that study is Nanette Cottrell, and she started more than 25 years ago, that study, so when the mothers were pregnant. So these offspring are also not children anymore. And since several years ago, we started a study in the Netherlands together with people from France and in England, Cambridge University. So it's a joint project in 3 countries, a study on gay fathers who did get a child through surrogacy.
I'm Lisa Schuster, and in case you didn't guess from the last panel, I'm a gestational surrogate. I carried 4 French IFs. They have a daughter who is 5 and a son who is 2.5. And I also do the GPAP program at Men Having Babies. So I'm working currently with 32 couples in our stage 2 process that are somewhere between starting out and pregnant on their surrogacy journey.
Wonderful, thank you. So, as I said, this discussion, this surrogacy, is about very subjective things, and it includes a surrogacy process includes multiple parties, as you already know in general, and we'll get into that more later on. It is about a family helping you, the family of the surrogate helping you become parents, not just her. It is about an egg donor, and if she has a family, they'll be involved as well and be part of this process to some extent. It is about interactions. It is about relationships, one way or the other, regardless of how long-term and how deep they are. So at this panel, we want to talk about subjective experiences and subjective outcomes in a more general way than the personal stories panel. So it's not about medical outcomes, it's not about legal outcomes, but how do people feel about this? How do we feel about how people feel about it? So I'll start with you, Jan, and we know that, we heard, and you guys actually heard, I've heard previous panels, the intended parents, the parents and the surrogates in the previous panel. And a lot of it, I'm sure, was positive. Did I miss a lot? It probably was positive. But we know the process is not always smooth and easy. So from your experience working with a lot of intended parents and parents in the process, what are the challenges or the things that parents, the anxieties or concerns people have or challenges from the subjective psychological standpoint when they start this process?
I think that it is a dance, and I think dancing is often difficult. It is a dance between something that is so strong of an emotional desire, your heart wants this so badly, and yet there is out there lack of control. It is a business. It is not just wanting it and having it happen. It is how do we combine the business with the desire and have it come out the way we want and need it to come out. So I think one of the big words that I always think about is a sense of trusting your gut. Everyone knows why their gut, yes? Right in there. And I think that is the part that is really difficult because this is a whole new world. And you hear many people expressing many opinions, many thoughts, many ideas. And then the counselor says, trust your gut, trust. And how do we achieve that? And I think the way we achieve that is by trusting ourselves and becoming knowledgeable consumers of a field. And I think that is a difficult challenge when we are starting off in this area. I have a few more. Okay. So again, parts of what we are dealing with, some of the difficulties. Again, I am not the doctor and I am not the lawyer, but I am the one that knows that when you are dealing with the surrogate, there are many things that you want to see happen that cannot always happen. So for example, your desire may be to know frequently, how are things right now? What is going on right now? There can be a desire to be able to touch, to know, to hear. Did you feel anything? What is going on now? Control. To control, exactly. And we are unable to do that because, as the other panel spoke so beautifully, it is about coming up with a communication strategy. And that can be so incredibly challenging. And yet I will suggest, as someone did earlier on the panel, Molly said, that the most important thing is coming up with good communication, but communication that honors where you are, and that is very important, and honors where the surrogate is. So I will suggest to you that when I am speaking to my IFs, my intended fathers, or my IPs, intended parents, just to clear the terms, that I always stress that there are two major things that must happen. The first thing is respect. And when I think about respect, it is, of course, respecting the surrogate and that the surrogate respects you, but it is also respecting yourself. Because if you do not go into this respecting what do I need to make this happen, then you are not going to be able to transmit that to the surrogate. So you have to learn, read the documents that MHB so beautifully provides, and learn and respect. So that is first and foremost respect, and then second, communication. Because again, that is how we regain a sense of control, because you are not having the baby. Your baby may be gestating thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away. But if you can establish a respectful, good communication strategy, it can happen beautifully.
Terrific. So, Lisa, the parents, the prospective parents, the intended parents, they might, be, concerned that they don't have control, they can't touch, they can't be there all the time. They, might be concerned that, about all the difficult decisions they have to make. Maybe they're even concerned that you're not going to give them the baby. What do the surrogates have what are the trepidations and concerns that you think surrogates have when they enter this process?
Well, I would say one is, if any fears you may have of the surrogate not giving up the baby, surrogates also have that fear of the IFs not taking the baby because they do not want the baby. I did not want those babies at the end, and it was important that legally everything was worked out so that was you guys were on the hook for that baby. But when you're involved in it, and there's so many people involved in it, I was concerned, and I think a lot of surrogates are, that I'm not doing it right, or you guys are concerned about something or worried about something, and you don't want to tell me because you're worried that it might upset me or it might put a hamper on our relationship. So I was always concerned that there was something going on in my IF's mind that wasn't communicated with me. So I think having that open communication can help dispel those anxieties about that. And then it was also, I absolutely could not have done it without my family, without my support network. So I was, when I got started with the idea of being a surrogate, it was my idea, and I kind of went forward. But then, I quickly realized I needed everyone there behind me to help me through the process. My children were still very young. I needed help, childcare, emotional support, and kind of all those things that go into it. And so that having my IFs not just embrace me, but my family as a whole, my community as a whole as well, made it easier for me then to get that support and to seek that support, because it really, kind of brought us together. And, they say it takes a village to raise a baby, but it really takes a village to create one too. So that, and then just the fact that I had to be comfortable giving up some of my decision making or deferring to my IFs, and we had talked about it in advance, and we were on the same page when it came down to medical decisions and what we were expecting from the journey. But ultimately, I'm not just making decisions for myself. They're making decisions that impact their child, but also could impact me as well. So it's something that is. Something that's not taken lightly, and that you really need to be sure you talk about in advance, so that while usually everyone's coming to a decision, that the surrogate still has ultimate decision making, and that everyone is in agreement with what your medical plans are.
So this is really about perspectives. You have one perspective, the surrogate has a perspective, you have support people in the agency, in the clinic, elsewhere, that can help allow everybody to understand everybody else's perspective, but it's also about a relationship and dynamics, as Jen was saying. So, given these challenges, that a surrogate's going to have to work with, the feeling of giving up some of her autonomy, yet the guys are going to not have full control either, and communication might be difficult, all those things. But it seems like it's working. We saw the personal stories panel. It seems like it's working. It seems like such a big challenge. So Jen, from your experience, how can the parties, being the agency, the clinic, the intended parents, the surrogate, what can they do best to prepare for this journey, to make sure that it works, and while they're in the journey, to make sure that it works further, given those challenges?
Okay. So first of all, I have to stress again and again the importance of a good match when you are selecting your surrogate. That is crucial, very, very important. And I know how excited everybody will be to be matched and, oh, finally, yes. But if it is not someone that you feel is going to work well with you, do not go with that person. And have a criteria of what you need in a surrogate to make it work well for you. So again, I always think back to communication, because that is what I do. What will communication look like between you and the surrogate? How often do you hope to communicate? Remember, it is never all about what she wants, and it is never all about what you want. It is how will the two of you work together and come up with something that can and will work. So sometimes surrogates will say, we text 5 times a day. And I think, I don't have time to text 5 times a day. So do not promise the surrogate that you will talk 5 times a day. You say what can be realistic. Because the other very important point is to be honest and realistic about what you want and need. It is creating realistic expectations, but make sure they represent what you want and need. And that is very important as well. Choosing your clinic carefully. You are going to hear that many, many times over the next day. Again, why this is such a good opportunity, because there are many different clinics, agencies that are represented. But choose carefully and think, what do I need in my clinic, in my agency? And because so many of you are in the beginning stages, I think you are thinking, I don't know yet. But that is what you are going to come out and go and walk around and figure out. I want to know what services will be provided. And we know matching and that will be provided, but will there be any source of ongoing support? If some issues arise, what is going to be the function of the agency? Will they help you speak to someone? Will they have people that will mediate? Because even when things are perfect, many of you are in relationships, perfect relationships, right? Always a few bumps in the road, but it is how do we deal with the bumps that is important. You are creating a new intimate relationship with your surrogate. There will be little blips, but we will deal with the blips when they happen and not when they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, as I might have said before, because who remembers? Never make a promise. I said that before, but I'm going to say that again. Never make a promise that you can't keep. Your relationship with the surrogate is very important. They listen to what you say. You are extremely important in their lives. So if you say you are going to do something, if you say you are going to come to Canada and visit them 3 times, then come. Or don't say you're going to come. Say that you hope, or you would like, or it is your plan. Because this relationship is so crucial to the surrogate. She is doing this because she wants to help somebody to make a family, but she wants to be there for you. So you also have to be there a little bit for her.
Let me just, does anybody want to add to this? Yeah, but let me just reiterate. So we're talking here about if we see all these surrogates here on stage, and maybe some of you have seen videos from previous conferences, or if you talk to an agency or a clinic and they talk about the surrogates, it sometimes may seem like they're too perfect. But the reality is that what Jen was just telling us, and we'll go into that in more details in the more structured session about what surrogacy is, the surrogates are A, screened, B, matched. What does that mean? Screened means that before a surrogacy agency, most reputable agencies, will even suggest a surrogate to you, that surrogate has had to go through not just medical, but also psychological screening.
Let me just talk to that for a moment, because it is usually when we speak to the intended fathers, it is not so evaluative in nature. We are not out to judge whether you are going to be good papas or not. That you're going to have to figure out how to be a good papa. So it is mainly to help you to understand what the relationship will look like, how to make it work, to make sure you're going into it as prepared as possible. But when we screen the surrogates, it is more evaluative in nature. I can't speak for all clinics, but I am sure they are all very similar. There is a medical piece to it, but the psychological piece is making sure that there is an emotional readiness to move forward in this area. So they are being evaluated, and many surrogates will not pass the screening. Do not expect that the one you see, we take anybody because we are desperate to have surrogates. We want to have good relationships happening. So we want to make sure that the surrogates are as carefully screened as possible. So again, that is more evaluative. We want to know about their habits, drinking, smoking, drug use, mental health issues, their family structure, their relationships, their personal stability. We want to know what their expectations are during the pregnancy and how do they imagine it will be afterwards as well. So they are asked many questions, and we have to write reports, believe me, to make sure that it is really done thoroughly.
So number one, screening. So the women you see here are not random women. If you look at this panel, if these panels, you say, this looks too good to be true. The reality is, yes, it is not the random person that became a surrogate. It is somebody that A, got screened, B, got matched. So matching and screening is not the same thing. Screening means that she has, generally speaking, suitability to understand the process, to go through the process, to have realistic expectations about the process. But matching means that she has similar vision or similar tempo or personality, whatever, that would work well with you as a couple. It's not exactly like dating, but it is something like that. So a good agency, a good clinic would make sure that by the time you work with the agent, and when we use the word work, by the way, in English, we don't mean work as a business work. We mean that you work with somebody. It could be also cooperative, social process. When you work with a surrogate, at that point already, the success of this relationship has already been determined just by virtue of screening her and matching her to you. And then there are things you need to do, as Jan was saying, during the process. And there's going to be people that make sure that you don't argue with her about finances, so that the agencies are going to take care of that, so that you don't ever have to ask her for a receipt or something. And there will be people that can help you sort through sensitive issues as they go through. So it doesn't happen by itself, but it works. And then there's support, either the agency or you want to talk about informal support, about social and family support.
So yes, so their support is crucial, absolutely crucial, but support comes in many, many different ways. So of course, I would almost suggest that a later step is to go to a counselor. The first step I feel so strongly about is, of course, between you and those who are lucky enough to have a partner, between you and your husband, your partner. That is, you have to be as close to on the same page as possible. You need your family, or family if possible. Sometimes that does not work out, I know. But you need a network. And I feel like I am being paid by men having babies. I am not on staff. But I feel very strongly about community. I think that it is all about having a community. And I think that no one understands better what you are going through, about how it feels to have a surrogate in Canada or America or the United States than somebody else that has also experienced that. So enlarge your networks. You are enlarging it by already sitting here today, but take advantage of this unique opportunity to connect with other people and make sure that you grow your networks. There are organizations all over Europe, as Ron mentioned earlier, right? Oh, sorry. As was mentioned earlier, there are organizations all over, but you have to seek out, because there will be unique things that will occur. And then if we are unable through those channels, then yes, you go out and you speak to a professional, lay out the concerns, look for mediation if necessary. Sometimes there are simple misunderstandings. Just one quick story. I had a surrogate who complained because she was having terrible morning sickness, you know, the beginning of the pregnancy, and she said, and my intended fathers aren't asking me how I feel. And I said, did you tell them that you are having morning sickness? And she said, no, they should know. That was an easy problem to deal with, was that she wasn't communicating what she was feeling very well. So again, sometimes just a third party that can say, have you tried, have you thought about, can be very helpful.
Yeah. Can I add something about the peer support? Because I think events like this are very, very important for you as intended fathers. But we should not forget that I think it's also very important when you have children that you also are meeting other families who are having the same family structure or the same diversity in family structure as your future families. We see that for children it's very, very important to see that they are not alone, not that they are talking there and telling to each other how difficult it is, of how it is to have two fathers and a surrogate at the other side of the world or something like that. No, just seeing that they are not alone and that there are more children who are growing up in similar family situations. So it's not only that I come here every year and really like this event, but I think it's also very important for the gay and lesbian parent movements in Europe to organize events that children can see each other and play with each other so that they can see, well, I'm not alone.
And I saw the video from the boat you guys had with the children in the Amsterdam Pride. But just one more word about peer support. Be also a little thoughtful about that. This whole panel is about being thoughtful or mindful about this process. When you look around you, evaluate your family, your friends, etc., try to think, where does support come from and where could additional stress come from? So, you might tell some people, we're going through this process, and some of them are going to be then, so are you pregnant yet? What's going on? And then, maybe one IVF cycle doesn't work and you feel like you now have to tell the entire world because you already have 1,000 followers or whatever. So you think about, this is a process that has uncertainty, it has ups and downs, and you will need support, and try not to make it worse to you by creating situations where you have more stress than otherwise. So I would say, personally, be discriminating about that. Think who you want to share it with. Think who are the friends who will give you support and provide some, well-being for you, and who are the friends who might add, or there might not be, but if there are, or anonymous friends on Facebook or whatever, that it might just cause more stress. And the same with family. Some family members might then be, very, anxious to see what's going on. Some of them might not be approving. You might not need that. So, but it is important to have that kind of support. So moving on to, I want to ask you, Lisa. I mentioned that the surrogates are not random women. They've been screened first. And one of the things that I know they're being asked when they're screened, and I know a lot of people here are asking, and maybe it came up in the previous panel when I was in my meeting, is why do they do this? What is the motivation of those surrogates to do this?
The primary motivation, I think, for surrogates here is, one, being able to give back for me. I conceived my children really easily, and it was, just by luck of biology and genetics that, not through hard work, not through anything that I did for my children. So for me, it was a way of giving back then. So I felt the universe had given that to me, and I wanted to give something back in return. So, and, I think emotionally, you also get a lot out of it. Bringing a life into this world is an amazing experience. And, being a surrogate, you get to take part of that, of somebody else's journey to parenthood, and be there with them through it, and have that momentous occasion of bearing a child and not having to change diapers or wake up in the middle of the night. So emotionally, it's just an amazing experience to go through. It's a lot of positivity, and love and joy that I got from the experience. I think a lot of people tend to think surrogates do it for the money, and we're in it to make a quick buck. It's our get-rich-quick scheme, and that is not the truth. There's a lot of ways to make that money a lot easier and a lot less time. That would be a common question I would get, as people would ask me, which I thought was pretty blunt, but, how much are you getting paid to do that? And for me, I said less than their nanny's going to get paid on the other side of this. I think when you really break it down, and people that are familiar with the process take a look at why surrogates do it, it's a lot different than people maybe on the outside are thinking the true motivations for it. So for me, it was an opportunity to give back and to help somebody else become a parent because that had been so important to me. And also, I just loved that. I didn't really love pregnancy, but I love that the delivery and bringing a baby into the world and seeing, my IFs. It was important for me for my IFs to be there, and so they were in the delivery room and getting to see their faces for the first time when they're meeting their baby for the first time is just an experience like no other. So, that's what motivated me, and to do another one to have their son as well.
So Jen, I want to ask you.
Okay, ask.
We know, as I said, those are not random women, and we heard what Lisa's saying, and Lisa knows surrogates also from GPAP because we work with, we have a lot of surrogates that help. What is your experience that this is typical? Is your experience that it's a spectrum, or what would you say?
I think it is definitely a spectrum, and I think many times, much like Lisa was saying, there is a sense of gratefulness that many surrogates bring, that they are grateful that they did not have difficulties at all and that they were able to make a family. And another interesting reason that I have heard that I want to share is that sometimes there are surrogates that have come from challenges in their background. And I have heard several times, more than several times, where they have said something like that their parents were not the best parents, that they had challenges in their upbringing, and that they knew that they were going to make sure that the life for their own children was going to be better than what they had experienced. And they also said that they do surrogacy because the intended parents are people that want and deserve to be able to make a family. And they say that there are so many people out there that can just get pregnant, have a family, and that they should not be parents. And they so often will say, this is a population that is putting everything on the line to achieve a family. And they want to be able to give these people that are going to be creating the next generation of children that are going to be deeply loved. And that's a pretty amazing reason to want to help somebody to make a family. And hats off to them.
So Henny, I believe Jen and I believe Lisa. Some people might not. Do we have studies that somehow measure this?
Yes, because this is also for researchers one of the important, most important and of course interesting questions. Why are women doing this? And before I will tell you something about it, we should be aware that it is not only one single motive. Most of the time they have several motives. And in a study where they asked the surrogates to check several motives, that you saw that the most mentioned motive was to help childless couple who want to become a parent in the future. Most of the time you also see that the surrogates have in their family or in their friends people who had to deal with infertility problems. So they really know what it is if people really want to become a parent and have children, but are not able to do it. So they want to do something back for these people. So that's the most mentioned motive. Another, the second mentioned motive is that they would like to feel once more, or maybe also for a second or a third time, the enjoyment of a pregnancy. Because most of them have, I think it's one of the criteria that you already have a family by your own, but they want really to have this enjoyment of being pregnant once more, or what I said before, maybe also for a third or fourth time. Another very frequently mentioned motive is that that they want to experience once more feeling very, very emotional well during such a pregnancy. And about the money, it's not that money money doesn't play any role. So you see that there are people who are saying that money is one of the motives, not the most important motive, but one of the motives. But it is mentioned as the less important motive. So I think it's very, very important to realize that the most important motive that is mentioned by the surrogates is helping other people.
And once again, just to make it more realistic, these are the women who were selected to be surrogates. So there were probably women who came to it with other set of expectations, and the majority of the women who come to this are screened out medically or psychologically. And there are women who are extremely miserable during pregnancy, and others who are experiencing the more positive aspects of pregnancy more so. And that's part of the screening. So a woman who's really miserable in her pregnancy should probably not do this. And so it's not just that they're all angels, it's that they only select the angels. But having said that, it's very important, we'll get back to that motivation is a snapshot. It's what happens right now. But motivation can be also dynamic. It could change over time. And you have a role in how that motivation changes over time. So a surrogate who might have been a little cynical about this initially and said, I want to stay 2 more years with my kids at home and, be able to do something that doesn't require to go outside and, I'll help somebody. And then she creates a relationship with you. She starts seeing the anxiety and the desire to be a parent in your eyes, and you treat her with respect. That other altruistic motivation is going to grow. A surrogate that you treat as a service, provider, as somebody that works for you, might have amazing altruistic motivation initially, but you might spoil it for her. So the initial motivation is not the only question. It's the question of what happens over time. So, Lisa, as I said, this is something that people say, really, could that be? Did people question this? Did people not believe you when you said all these wonderful things?
Oh, I do think there's a sense of not sure what to expect and not sure. For me, I live in a very socially progressive area when it comes to homosexuality. So when I told people I was a surrogate, people often were like, oh, okay. And then I said, for 2 dads. And they're like, oh, that's wonderful. So I think people, not knowing or not ever knowing a surrogate or not knowing, parents through surrogacy, have an image of a surrogate, of somebody who's been taken advantage of, or somebody who doesn't have a very good education. So when they meet me and they know me and they say, well, you don't fit with what the preconceived notion of a surrogate is. And so for me, I had to, work to change people's opinions. People were thinking surrogates as somebody in it to make a buck because they didn't, financially they weren't stable, which, in addition to the psychological and medical screening, you also kind of go through financial screening as well. To be a surrogate, you can't be on assistance. You have to be in a financially secure place. So people did, they had that mixed vision of who I was and that they knew me and what they expected or thought a surrogate was. So, I think through increased knowledge and getting that message out there, I think people realize that surrogates aren't just somebody going through this just to make a quick buck or going through it for the wrong reasons, but people who understand the process, who are educated about it, who know what's going to be expected of them, and what to expect from the parents as well, and that have made an informed decision is something they truly want to do and not something that they feel forced into by life circumstances.
And Henny, we know that this is something that we hear a lot, and quite frankly, there's probably a little bit of a difference between Europe and the United States about this. We surrogates are from the United States and Canada by definition now, because unfortunately it's illegal here. Of course, there are some surrogates in the UK. and very few in Belgium. But so most of them that we hear the stories are from the United States, and there's a slightly different attitude in the United States to that. But we know that here, a lot of the attitude is that there are weak women. Maybe they think they like it, but they don't know well enough. So can you talk a little bit about, and some of that is that they think that, yes, they might think that this is good for them, but over the long term, they're going to regret it. They're going to be traumatized by it. What do we know from studies about the long-term psychological well-being of the surrogates, of their children, of the children of the couple, and of the children of gay parents?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the psychological well-being of the surrogates in short and long-term perspective. And well, again, we should not forget that these are not random women who are doing this. So they are screened. So I'm not surprised about the findings of these studies that these women are doing well, because one of the things they are tested on or screened on is how emotional stable they are. So that means that I was not surprised that when you compare them before that they started with it, so during the screening and before they started with all this surrogate journey, that they did that, and then following them in long term, that psychologically they're doing very well when you compare them during all these times. So because they are emotional stable women, they know what they are doing. It's not that these women are saying that it was easy to give back the child to the parents. That we see that when you ask them immediately or almost immediately after that they are saying most of them are saying that it is something difficult. Most of them are also saying that how and when to give the child to the parents, that is something that they did discuss and talked about also before with the intended fathers or the intended parents. When you ask them 1 year later, they are already saying, oh no, it was not so difficult. So you also see here that time also is doing something. Then the question about how the children, no, let's first their children, so the children of the surrogates, they are looking at this. And we should not forget that children have to deal with the fact that their mother is pregnant, but that the child will not grow up in their family. So important here is that also here already during the pregnancy, the mother is talking with the children about what is going to happen, and that the baby where the mother is pregnant from at that moment, that will not grow up in the family, but that doesn't mean that the children will stay in the family. So that's important to talk about. And I think here in one of the most important factors or predictors in the well-being of the children is the relationship between the parents and the children. And you should also see that here, that it's very important. Then the third question.
Let me just say on that one that there have been, some, the kids are doing okay over long term, but there have been some attention being put to the fact that those children might develop anxieties about the fact that if this baby grows in my mom's tummy and then goes somewhere else, will she give me away too? Okay, so there are anxieties that could be predicted. Don't happen a lot, but the fact is that as it is done in a good way and with a professional support and with transparency. So the children, one of the most important things is for the children of the surrogate to not just have a good relationship with their parents, that's always good, but also to know who the intended parents are, to meet them, to meet you, so that they know you are the parent of, the little baby that's in the tummy. You're not their parents, so they're not going to be given to you. It's the baby in the tummy that you're the parents of. And that clears everything in their mind. So that's we'll talk about later, that's one of the best practices that we suggest, and most agencies would encourage you in clinics to make sure that you meet her entire family and that her children know who you are. Of course, if she desires that as well.
Can I just add one piece of that? I also suggest, in addition to making sure that the children are part of the Skype calls and that they get to know you when they're Skyping, send them a hard copy picture of yourselves as well. I recommend to my surrogates that they take a picture, that they have a picture of their intended fathers, that they tack on the refrigerator or a bulletin board as a more constant reminder. Because the children are the ones that are going to be hearing, oh, you must be excited to have a new brother or sister all the time. So it is important that they have the message very clearly that, silly, this isn't our baby. We're helping some friends. We're helping somebody else. And having hard copy pictures, which is even better than
somebody else, namely.
exactly. We are helping these people. And I want the children to see it regularly so that you are very real to them. And I also encourage the fact that when I talk to the surrogates, that their family is helping, not just the surrogate, but the surrogate and her family is helping somebody else, some other people, to create a family. So we have strategies to how to get children involved in the process as well, to help with that feeling of not, that they understand very clearly that this is not our baby, this is the baby that we are helping to make for somebody else.
And it should not be a
let me
secrecy,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So be open about it.
So Henny, the other thing we're hearing, a little more in Europe than elsewhere, is that, and in France a lot, sorry, is that somehow the children, your children, are going to be, thank you so much, are going to be, miserable. So surrogacy is bad because your children are going to be traumatized by the fact they're going to be snatched away from the nice, warm, and pleasant womb where they were, and be handed to different parents. So I don't know if any of those people really seriously believe that, but they're saying that all along. Do we have any studies about how do the children of the gay, parents first and surrogacy in general?
Yeah, let's first say that most of these studies are done on heterosexual parents who did get a child by surrogacy. And they are already following this group very, very, very long. These children are already teenagers or maybe in the age of emerging adulthood now. And from these studies, we know that the children are doing well. If we compare these children with heterosexual father-mother families who did get a child with just having sex, then we see that they are doing very, very well. When you compare them with children who were born by IVF, so not with a surrogate and not with an egg donor, you see that they are doing very well. But very recently, there are done several studies in Europe and also in the US and in Canada among gay fathers who did get a child through surrogacy. And also here, we see that, and it doesn't matter how old the children are. So, for example, we did a study when the children were 4 months old and 1 year old, and when they were 1 year old, we can already do an investigation on their emotional well-being by observation, for example, and we see that the children do not differ at all from heterosexual IVF parent families or lesbian families. And also when the children are getting older, there's a whole research line at Cambridge, Cambridge University, for Susan Golombok, and also there we see that the children are doing very well when we compare them with children from heterosexual families. Also in Italy, there's a whole, recently there was a very, very good article in Human Reproduction, and the children were between 9 and 13 years old. Children from gay fathers who did get a child with surrogacy, they compared them with heterosexual parents. No significant differences in psychological well-being of psychological problems.
And those of you who were here early, we had a clip from our Florida conference in June, where, as in some other of our United States conferences, we have a teen panel, a panel of teenagers who were born through surrogacy. One of those girls was my daughter. And the reality is that they think this is the most stupid thing they ever heard, to think that they would have any trauma, because by the time they can, they know, they have no notion, of course, of where they grew up in for the next 9 months of their existence as biological, entities. And what's more important is they don't feel like commodities. The fact that they find out later that we paid the doctors, the agency, and even the surrogate never makes them think for a minute that it makes them a product, it makes them a commodity. It makes them in fact, they think they're pretty special. So I encourage you, if you're interested, there are a lot of clips on our website, on a YouTube page, channel, from our teen panels. If you're interested in reading more or actually viewing more about that. It has also some information about how they feel about their birth story, how they heard about, how they came to the world, how they feel about it, etc. So it's very interesting. One more thing I want to mention before we get into the ethical, the specific ethics, is that as an organization, we're very proud to have collaborated and helped some of the studies. Henny and I know each other for many years now.
Yes.
And one day when you are parents, you will have the opportunity to submit a survey with us about your experience. And one of the questions we asked in the survey is, will you be willing to be part of an academic study? And we have more than 1,200 people already, parents, families that submitted those surveys, and a lot of them agreed to be part of the academic studies. And we've also did some data mining of this information. So I really encourage you to help us with this by submitting those surveys one day. So before anything to add before we move? Because okay, I want to mention then that several years ago, as we were, I have to admit it, in particular as we started having conferences in Europe, while we always felt very good about surrogacy individually, I'm saying we being the staff and the board members of Men Having Babies, many of them of us at least at the time were surrogacy dads. As we started encountering this criticism, we figured we need to try to write down those things that we feel about surrogacy to, what would make surrogacy acceptable ethically. Would any surrogacy journey be okay, or are there some conditions? And the first thing we did is we decided that we need more than one perspective for that. So what we did is we already knew a lot of surrogates because we always had surrogates coming to our conferences to speak, and we asked who was interested, and we created a committee of surrogates that helped us create what we now call the ethical framework for surrogacy. So it was us being parents in several countries, including Europe and Israel, and this group of surrogates. We had Google Documents going for almost a year, and we created what you all, I think you got this handout, I presume. So take it home and take a look at it. I just want to explain what it is. And what it is 3 parts. Part 1 are the principles, what we think about surrogacy. There's some interesting things there some people don't expect. For instance, we think that surrogacy should be more regulated. We think that the compensation for the surrogates should be capped. It should not be, we think it's too high, quite frankly, in the United States right now. And we think that the way the compensation is done in the United States is bad. And we'll talk about that a little more tomorrow. But we think the compensation for the surrogate is not for a job they do for you, is for the disruption that is taking place to their family and family lives. Their lives for 2 years have to revolve around the demands of the surrogacy. It is for the discomfort, the physical discomfort. Even those women who are on that side of the spectrum and like pregnancy more than other women, it's still, was it all fun, Lisa? No. So even if she doesn't work for you, shouldn't she get some compensation for that? And the third part is the risk. She's taking some risk for you. This is minimized once again by good clinics. They will make sure that women who that have a higher risk in the pregnancy should not do it. So that's a major reason why women are not approved for surrogacy if their medical data is such that they're not optimal. But even those who are optimal for this in many ways, they still take a risk. So the risk, the discomfort, and the disturbance, the disruption to their lives is what warrants this. And they're not getting this money because they're spending X number of hours for you. It's not because they are selling something to you. It's not because they are renting something to you, as some languages, vulgarly call surrogacy, renting of a womb. It is done, which means that it is nothing like the workplace. In the workplace, you get more money if you work more money if you are more talented. There's no such thing as a talented surrogate. You get money for renting things, you get money for buying things. Our ethical guidelines states very carefully, and I think most of the agencies and the clinics that are part of these conferences have the same policy, that it doesn't matter whether there's a live baby at the end of the process, the surrogate gets the same compensation. Sometimes there are components of the compensation that have to do with how long the pregnancy was, but not with the result of the pregnancy. If a surrogacy contract states that she gets a bonus of $5,000 if the baby is healthy, that's an unethical surrogacy contract. And I've never seen that. I've never seen that, certainly not in the United States. I've seen it in other countries. So those are the principles. The second part are baseline protocols for providers. What we think a clinic or an agency should do at the very minimum in order to treat their surrogates fairly. They have to be well represented. They have to be to understand what they're doing, to have full consent, full informed consent, and some other things. But what's the most important part is the last part, which we call best practices, because the reality is that at the end of the day, the first part are the principles, that's about legislation. The second part are baseline protocols, that's about the providers. The third part is about you. At the end of the day, it's what you do that would affect the quality, and I think also the ethical quality of this process. So if this is something of concern for you, please read this. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those issues as far as there also are suggestions for a smooth ride, for a smooth journey. But if you want to feel, because I always say that one day, this, including this evening, is going to be part of the birth story of your children. Okay? And you'll see it. And one day, maybe your child is going to be in a team panel. And they're going to tell the birth story. They'll say, one day my dads went to a conference in Brussels. And the rest is history. But that, if you want to feel good about the birth story you're going to tell your children one day, read this document. So I want to open it for some questions. We have a few minutes, but do you want to add anything first in principle, about the ethical document? I mean, we have several European and other associations that have endorsed this document. We have it in 6, I think, languages on our website, and we have some copies of the first part in several languages up in the front. And the network of European LGBT Family Associations, NELFA, has last year or a little before that have also endorsed similar principles that we've also endorsed. So it is possible to say that there's a consensus among at least LGBT organizations about some of these principles.